So it is 5 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And hopefully we get some more people joining us as we go. I just want to go over a little bit of etiquette real quick. We're going to have everybody muted except our speakers. And the mute is in your bottom left corner if you don't know. And we're going to have all the participants except your speakers turning off. We can focus on the speakers. It just makes it a little bit easier to focus when there's a lot of people on. And then you can have the speaker view in the top right-hand corner. If you have questions, we're going to be taking questions as at the end, and you can put your questions into the chat box and we'll get to them as we go. And we'll also put some links in there that you can follow when you go. Meg is our tech moderator tonight. She is the events manager for MFT, and we are recording this talk, just so that you know. And we'll have a link to it in a follow-up email at a later time, sometime next week. So I am Karen Giles. I'm the Maine Farmland Trust Gallery Coordinator and also the Fiore Art Center Assistant, Virtual Artist Talks for 2020. At Maine Farmland Trust Gallery, we celebrate agriculture through art. We try to capture the vibrancy of Maine's farms and farmers and their intimate relationship to the earth, the crops they grow, and the animals they tend. Founded in 2008, the MFT Gallery is a gallery with a mission that has attracted artists from all over Maine and beyond who share a love for their rural heritage and are committed to the earth's well-being. We hope that through this gallery, more people will come to understand the promise of farming and as a result, lend continued support. MFT's mission is to protect Maine farmland. Begun 20 years ago, and we found it was necessary to ensure that we will have enough farmland to grow our food in the future. In the midst of these challenging times, MFT has evolved programs to meet the needs of farmers, from protecting farmland with conservation easements to helping farmers find and get on the land, to farm business planning programs that help farms grow thriving businesses. Our work aims to cultivate a thriving agricultural landscape in Maine, where farms feed our communities. Artists reach out and connect us. They bring us closer together and give deeper meaning and understanding to the world around us. Small wonder that so many resonate so deeply with Maine Farmland Trust, and we hope that you do too. So enjoy your evening. We're going to allow for 10 to 15 minutes at the end of this meeting for anyone who wants to stay on and ask questions or have your questions answered. So please type your questions in the chat box and we will get to as many as we can. Tonight's talk is to share the works of the current virtual exhibit, A Reflection on Water. And it runs virtual exhibit, explores the relationships that exist between humans and this precious resource with evocative multimedia, and considers current issues regarding water as an essential component of agriculture and our ecosystem. As an essential element for every living organism on Earth, it is small wonder that we feel the deep connection on some levels from practical to sacred. The show includes work from 17 different artists that seek to show the diverse connections and needs for this essential and ever-changing substance. You'll be hearing from a few of the artists in the show behind the work they created, their processes, and their connections with MFT and or farming. So tonight, just a quick list, and then I'll do brief introductions of each one as we go. We have Chris Ann Baker, Catherine Chagas, Carol Douglas, Jude Valentine, and Tracy Cockrell. And our list is Chris Ann Baker, who is a multimedia ecological artist and activist whose work is concerned with water quality, availability, and rights. She has an MFA in visual arts, ecological arts from Vermont College of Fine Arts, and a BFA in painting from the Rhode Island School of Design. Are you all set, Chris Ann?
Okay, getting ready to share.
You need to, there you go. You're muted again, Chris Ann.
Unmute.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm.
Can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration for that?
Yes, I had been researching water quality and why there seemed to be a proliferation of cancer in the United States. And I started doing my own research, looking at the different types of chemicals that were in water. Actually, one of the pieces that I had in grad school was an in-ground installation, and it had names of chemicals that were found in water. And at the time that I did that research, I think I found like 33 common chemicals that were in municipal waters. But now there's hundreds that have been identified. And so that knowledge from the research that I gained just scared the heck out of me, and wanted to make a short video about it that was painterly, but at the same time, you know, to catch people's eyes, but at the same time be kind of like an infomercial. Yeah.
That is very striking and a very powerful piece. I'm really glad we got to include it
Thanks.
in this show. Kind of fits the theme kind of perfectly. Anything else that you wanted to add about any of your work?
Well, sure. I continue to be concerned about water quality. My focus for the last 10 years has been on the ocean specifically because all the waters on land eventually end in the ocean, and our oceans have been suffering through ocean acidification, pollution, all sorts of things. So my paintings specifically have been focusing on underwater situations in the Gulf of Maine. I've been studying the microscopic of phytoplankton and how our lives depend on them. And then I've also looked at the phytoplankton situation with the coral reefs down in the Gulf of Mexico. So I have two different bodies of painting going on, the Gulf of Maine and the Gulf of Mexico. But they're all based on this symbiotic relationship between these growing entities. They're animals, actually, they're not plants. And then the phytoplankton, which cause them to be able to proliferate. And but yeah, they're all endangered right now. So my paintings basically are an ocean awareness call for people to notice what's going on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing that wonderful work. That's such important work.
Thanks.
Okay. So I do apologize. My internet appears to be lagging a little bit. We're going to go ahead and move on to our second artist, Catherine Chagas. She's originally from Montreal, and she's lived in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic before she settled into Belfast. Good choice. She holds a BFA from the University of the Arts and has exhibited nationally. She's inspired by music and her early training in classical piano. And she works with the experience of energy. Catherine, are you able to?
I'm here, yeah. Can you hear me and see me? You seem frozen, but
Yes.
yeah. How is the sound? Is it okay? It's good, okay. So first of all, Chrisanne, that was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And just gorgeous. I totally wowed by it. I guess I will share my screen now. But just for a little bit of an introduction, I grew up with music. My mom was a piano teacher, and at the age of 4, I was giving little recitals and did that until I was about 20, and then I stopped playing music seriously, but always have had a great love of all kinds of music. So when I started to paint, I was living in Maryland at the time, and I took lots of long walks in the countryside where there were lots of horses and pastures. And I've never owned a horse, and I've been on a horse a few times in my life, but I was just entranced by the rhythm and the flow and the feeling and the spirit of these gorgeous animals. So I began to paint them, and I did that for a number of years and found that I was mostly really excited by the energy and the spirit that was part of that. And eventually there's a story about Kandinsky that I had really loved, that, he painted horses among other things. And one day he walked into a studio around 1910 or so, and he saw a painting, and he thought, wow, this is amazing. He loved it and didn't know where it came from, and then realized it was a horse painting upside down. So that was part of my inspiration. Eventually, I just expanded. Instead of painting actual horses, I began to paint just a relationship of, energy in nature and in all form. And when I moved to Maine a few years ago, I, being here by this amazing water that we're so lucky to be close to, and realizing how it's so essential to life and so broad and seems so powerful, but yet is so incredibly fragile. Probably most everybody here knows that the Gulf of Maine is the fastest growing, fastest warming body of water in the world. So my paintings for the last few years have been about energy and about nature, and trying to make visible what's invisible. Energy and rhythm are kind of invisible, but I try to bring them into form. And especially I'm influenced by water. And I'm going to share my screen now. There we go. There we go. Can you see? So I'll just share a few of the paintings. Those first three are in the show. This is 36 by 36. And these are little ones at 6 by 6. And then these are 22 by 30, the last couple. And so my work, and one other thing I could say is that it's almost, I consider it a meditation for a person who can't sit still. I just try to be really at one with the work that I'm doing, and just respond to what's on the page and or the canvas, and just try to make it be a bigger connection, so that a painting like this, which is pretty chaotic, I try to find the connection so somehow it feels whole. And I'll just run back through quickly, and that's that.
What are your mediums, Catherine?
I work with acrylics, and then I work with a whole lot of different drawing mediums. I work with oil crayons and oil sticks and watercolor sticks and inks and pencils. And sometimes instead of brushes, I will use almost anything, like sticks from outside or my fingers. I pour sometimes. I just try to change it up. And one time I had a teacher who said to me, when you're in trouble, don't change your color, change your tool. And I kind of live by that. I try to really add variety just to keep myself on track.
If anyone has, yep, there we go. There's a question here, Catherine. We have a little bit of time to answer it. Do you listen to music when you're painting?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I forgot a very important part of that. I always listen to music when I'm painting, and I adore many, many different kinds of music. And I kind of approach a painting by listening. I'll put something on that just appeals to me. My current interest is 1980s Afro pop. This Baba Mal and people like that. I just find it really evocative and beautiful. And I also come to it, as I think every artist does, with where I am in that day. And as we all know, the last 8 months have been just a time of incredible heartbreak and chaos. And I try to just connect to all of that and within the music and just see what happens. Like I don't start with an idea at all. I just come to try to be present and be in the moment and see what transpires.
Catherine, what tools do you use as far as brush type?
The cheapest, usually.
Do you use chip brushes at all?
Do I use what kind?
No,
chip brushes?
Yeah, it's the Chinese bristle. They're like $1 at the paint.
Oh, Yeah, I have those, and I have a lot of brushes that are just, you know, the really cheap ones. You can get it by the group from Michael's and places like that. I have a few good brushes, but I'm really hard on my brushes. So I, you know, it's usually not worth it to destroy something and feel badly about it.
Is the black India ink or black paint?
In which painting?
Well, there was some that had some black outline in it. I was just wondering if it was
Yeah.
ink.
Oh, like this. This actually, I think this black is, I also use these big fat Stabilo they're pencils. And I also use something called tailor's chalk, which is like a flat chalk that a tailor would use to.
And my father used to have it in his pocket.
Oh, okay. I believe this may be a combination of tailor's chalk,
interesting.
oil pastel, and those
Yeah.
fat watercolor pencils.
It's a lot of energy.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Should I stop sharing, Karen?
Do you have any other comments that you wanted to add to that, or you feel pretty complete, Catherine?
I think the only other thing I would say is how much I value the Farmland Trust and the gallery. When I was painting horses, actually one reason I ended up in Belfast was that I connected to the gallery just through happenstance and through Anna, and I just think the work is amazing, the work that the trust does. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We very much appreciate that. And all of the good work that you've had in the gallery over the years as well. Yeah, definitely. Look, I'm all teary-eyed now. I'm going to get back to my notes here. Thank you very much. That was really interesting and fascinating to see all of those beautiful paintings. Next up on our list, we have Carol Douglas. Carol was a 2018 Fiore Art resident here in Jefferson, which is where I'm sitting currently. She's a plein air painter extraordinaire. She has traveled extensively to paint and taught workshops in Maine, New Mexico, Florida, and New York. Her work has been shown in galleries across the United States, and her daily blog, Watch Me Paint, is ranked one of the top 75 art blogs. So take it away. Do you have your paintings ready to share?
I do, but I'll talk. So, boy, I've got some odd. Okay, so you know, what water means in art is so varied that it's really hard to put a handle on it. In Christian theology, water is associated with baptism, which is a positive thing, and rebirth, but it's also associated with the flood of Noah. And then you've got that on one side, and then on the other side, as far as you could get, polar opposite of that, you would have like a David Hockney saying that the water in a swimming pool represented hedonism. And in thinking about what water means in painting, I think you could probably say that every possible position in between those two poles has been explored by painters. I am not a didactic painter. I used to be, but I've gotten old. But I don't usually lecture through my paintings. I think the number one thing that I am just trying to say is that creation is glorious and we should look at it. And if somebody walks away from that and says, well, then I should do something to preserve it, then that is the end goal, but I'm not going to spell it out for them. So what kind of response those paintings and my paintings have, I think is probably as varied as the goal in painting them. And I hope that my own paintings come across as an image of anywhere from uncertainty to a sense of renewal. So I realized, Karen, when I was flipping through images the last couple of days that I actually paint water more than I paint any other subject. I don't know how uncommon that is among plein air painters, and I would just say that I'm a simple plein air painter, but I think that for me, water itself is a metaphor for human existence. So I often paint this single painting that I return to over and over again, and that is the small boat on the big sea alone. And sometimes that sea is tranquil, and sometimes that sea is beautiful, and actually more often that sea is quite threatening. To me, that is the metaphor for our life. So I am going to also share my screen and talk about the 3 paintings that I have in this show. And oh, great. So let me see here. Now you guys will have to tell me if my slides are showing. Let me go back. Guys, are you seeing my slideshow?
Yes.
Great, thanks, Karen. Okay, so this is my first painting is called Fog Bank, and this is the only sea painting that I have in this show. And this is actually a location where being caught in the fog could have great ramifications because it's a dangerous spot where the tide is very high and comes in quickly. The fog on the coast, since most of you live on the coast, you know that it can move in very quickly and it can actually be very dangerous. But at the same time that it's threatening, it can also be quite beautiful. This painting, to me, the jury is still out in my mind about what I think about it, because I keep flipping back and forth between wanting to simplify shapes. If I had a 20th century painter that I admire more than anybody else, it'd probably be Clifford Still. And yet then, as often happens with realists, I'm drawn back into wanting to paint detail. This obviously was a painting where I let the detail go. So the second one is a very different painting. I call this painting Home Farm. And this is a painting where somebody has tamed water into prosperity. So, you know, it's a wealthy farm, and that is a retaining pond, and the water that is driving the wealth of this pond. This person's biggest concern is not their water supply. It's probably what the property values are and whether he's going to continue to be able to farm this land. So the third painting, which I included in this show, is Beaver Dam painting. And this has actually become one of my favorite paintings of the last several years. The first thing about beaver dams is they're built by animals, not by man. Gosh darn it, I don't know anything else that's analogous to that in the natural world. But to me, it's an awesome thing. And the second thing that is amazing to me is how beaver dams are really a collection of tiny, fragile sticks, and yet they're an accretion over time. So there's the element of which, you know, they're built, but they're built over time. And the impact of a beaver dam over time is just amazing. It will also ultimately change the course of the waterway that it's sitting in. If you've ever seen a beaver dam, you know that it creates a pond behind it. And to me, that is a great metaphor for life. You have this detritus that builds up little tiny bits of things, and it can completely obstruct the flow of your life if you allow that to happen. And I'm just going to stop that share because that's really all I wanted to say about the paintings, but I have a couple other things that I did want to say. And that is that in painting landscape, water and sky are usually the same color or very close to the same color. They're reflecting each other. And the land in a landscape painting is often just a tiny fragile tissue that's lying between the water and the sky. What interests me about the water is that it's a parallel of reality. It's not reality itself. Everything that you see reflected in the water is really just an image of something that's happening in the sky. Beyond that, that's all I got. Say something brilliant, Karen.
If I can unmute myself, I can do it.
There you go.
Thank you. That was terrific.
Thanks.
There we go. I am having a bit of a lag, so I do apologize. That was terrific. What a great analogy between the sky and the water. The great thing I see about that is that the sky holds water also. So it's a reflection and a kind of eternal circle and cycle. So that's a great analogy. I really love that. And if anyone has any questions for Carol, we do have a little time that I could get to them right now if you want. And if you think of them later, feel free to drop them in the chat. So,
Thank
and
you.
artists, feel free if you have questions also, please, please feel free to
Karen,
ask.
on the subject of the sky and the sea being made of the same material, which they are, it's amazing to me how many millennia the human beings have understood the hydrological cycle and where water comes from and how it goes to the sea and how it goes back. It's got to be one of the earliest scientific knowledges that human beings have.
And yet sometimes we forget.
Yeah, like every day. So Sarah, thank you. Yeah, I almost always paint plein air. I prefer to paint plein air greatly, but it gets cold here in the wintertime. So yes, I do paint from photographs then. And also, like every other artist, I paint commission paintings, which require working from photos.
Carol,
Uh-huh.
have you ever thought about, when you look at a beaver dam, how many of those sticks were intentionally placed and how many others just drifted into the framework and became part of the bigger picture? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, no, I haven't, because my impression of them is that they're very, very precise. That, yeah, I'm sure that you're right, that there is some drift going on there, but they are so beautifully constructed that I can't believe that. I've got to think the vast majority of them are intentional on the part of the beaver.
You know, it's interesting. You wish a contractor could work as quickly as they do, but it's almost overnight they can put up a dam, and it's and you never see him at work.
Yeah,
That's the best contractor to have.
maybe they can come and finish painting my house.
No, but it is amazing. There's a dam along a roadside I drive along, and I swear there wasn't a dam there last week, and now there is, and it's incredible. And I think that animal protection people and the wardens have such a hard time respecting their lives and their viability, and trying to displace them to other locations where they're not a nuisance. But it's quite a tug and pull situation between wanting to preserve their habitat and their viability and yet not have them obstruct waterways. It's a challenge. Nice work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Okay. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, please. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to Jude. So Jude Valentine is a mid-coast landscape painter and printmaker. She is currently the public programs coordinator in the education department at the Farnsworth Art Museum. She was also an adjunct associate professor at UMaine Machias and a visual thinking strategies facilitator and school trainer. She was a resident artist at the Joseph Fiore Art Center at Rolling Acres here in Jefferson in 2017.
Thanks so much, Karen.
You're welcome, Jude.
I'm going to share my screen and ask if can anyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Oh yeah, there we go. Is it full size? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. This is the series of work that Karen asked me to choose from in terms of submitting some pieces on the theme of water. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts on this. And also, it's an outstanding show, and I just feel really honored to be part of it. So where to start? So these pieces, the water pieces are, I believe this piece here is in the show, and then this piece? No, sorry. Now I'm stuck. Okay, this piece. And I think this piece, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, so these three pieces, and so this body of work came out of residency I was involved with students at the South Dakota College of Mining and Technology, which is exactly what students are trained for: hydrolysis, geologists, engineers. A lot of them go into the oil industry. It's very heavy on science. And I spent 10 days with them virtually, first of all, to kind of get some feedback from their course of studies. But I was an artist in residence. So I was really there on the as a visitor to their art department, but I was able to kind of make these cross connections. And at the time, it was really dovetailing with a lot of, I was reading a lot of studies in science and biology that had to do with numbers and mathematics, and how, for example, the golden spiral is an underlying mathematical geometric concept that is a scaffold for many of the forms of nature. And this was a point that I wanted to weave through this series, just taking numbers and looking at geologic forms, as well as insects, mammals, all kinds of life forms on Earth, and kind of weave a story through number. So water in this piece has, within the swirls of water are the phi sequence, the golden sequence, or the golden spiral. So any eddy that is produced by a movement through water, like a duck or a boat, is a spiral in that golden ratio, and that is a property of the number 5, and the number 5 nests as a pentagon. It nests inside of itself, and it's found in nature in various forms in plants. When you slice an apple, you have a 5-star a pattern in silver dollars on ocean animals. So these were the things I was layering and playing with, and really kind of bringing back to the students. And it ended up being a show of 21 works. So this one is another number 5, but it's not in the show. Sorry, how did I get here? We go. All right. This is a number 6, which is a water molecule, the crystalline of Burrell, snowflake patterns, and chicken wires, or honeycomb, actually. And this one is also a number 6, which relates to the water molecule, and then insects that have 6 legs. So I was really, with this series of work, I was interested in making these connections that may not be obvious, but are just a way that are all of the various realms that we tend to silo in our collection of knowledge is actually really all interconnected. So that was my sense of in creating these pieces. And water was one of the elements that kind of flowed through a number of them, because of the properties of the spiral, and then the properties of the water molecule. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
There is one. Oh, there's two now, actually. From Echo Art Space. She says she doesn't see this work on your website.
Oh, it should be under prints. So I didn't mention, yes, these are digital prints.
There you go. And that answers Sarah's question also, because she asked what medium you were using. So there you go.
Okay. Yeah, so they're digital prints on prepared papers. So there's a lot of layers to them. They're 24 by 36 inches.
Super. And Carolyn asks, oh, and then you've already answered that. What size is your artwork? So you've already asked it. Perfect.
And they live on my website. They live under the prints page. So they're
So she found them.
yeah, they're under geometry of nature.
Yeah. What a beautiful body of work that is altogether, Jude.
Thanks. It's it was exhibited up at the University of Maine Machias, and then it was out in South Dakota and Grand Rapids, and yeah, it was a really interesting approach, and it gave me a lot of food for thought in terms of different ways of proceeding. Thanks so much for your attention and for your comments and questions.
Actually, I have one question, and this is Catherine. How did you get interested in this? It's fascinating.
I came across this book called it's from the 1900s called Geologic Structures, and they were looking at they didn't know, you know, like they didn't have the technology that we do now in terms of mapping underground. So they were really trying to I became kind of enamored with the imagery, because it was very mathematical, and they were really trying to discover how to map out the underground without seeing it. And so that got me started. And then I also ran across Michael Snyder's work, which is the Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe. And that's just loaded with all kinds of stuff. And he's a mathematician and teaches. And so it really just kind of kickstarted me into the way of thinking, and then working with students that were really science-based was another, you know, a whole other avenue of breaking down kind of not so much walls, but, you know, talking with folks that you don't normally get a chance to talk to, who don't always or at all consider themselves artistic or even creative. And by the end of the residency, they were starting to see how the materials that they considered so you know, so mundane, like the earth, which is not mundane at all, but you know, it's to them they just had a different view of it. It was numbers. Well, it's numbers, but numbers have a inherent harmony and also a visual expression. And so this was a way, this series of work was also a way of setting up a communication between two kinds of ways of looking at the world.
It's a beautiful unity. I love it.
And Tracy had a quick question. What tools or software do you use for making your digital prints?
Oh, it was just Photoshop. You know, it was not the fancy Photoshop either. It was one of the first ones. So it was not, was a very small screen, you know. Yeah, it is just I think it was CS2, if they make that. It was one of the first Photoshops anyway that came out with, you know, on a CD set.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing, all of you guys at the Farmland Trust. It's really appreciated.
Thank you. Absolutely. Okay. Just going back to this here.
Let's start sharing.
Okay, so our final speaker for the evening is going to be Tracy Cockrell. She was actually a 2019 Fiore Art resident. We have a bunch of them tonight. She is an adjunct associate professor of the Master of Fine Arts in Studio Art at the Maine College of Art. And she's also the New Directions Artist in Residence for this year at UMass Dartmouth. Her current research is about the complex relationships between language and landscape and psychoacoustics and the subjectivity of place. That's fabulous.
And I'm happy to explain more about that too.
Yes, please.
I'll share my screen in a moment, but I just want to start by saying how wonderful it is to hear from some of the other artists in the show. It's such a unique show, and I hear so much overlap amongst all of us, even though our work looks so different from one another. And so I'm really excited about this kind of expanded conversation about how we make and how we think about something that's such a common experience as water. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to also share some audio. So I'll let you know that I will try to control the audio from my end, but you may find on your end that you need to adjust the volume just a little bit. And I'll give you a warning about which of these are soft and which of them are louder. The work of mine that's in the show now is actually from work that I started while in residency up at the Tides Institute and Museum of Art up in Eastport, Maine, where I was in May of 2019, and then got to come to the Fiore Art Center in September of the same year. So I was still percolating on the work that I had begun to make up in Eastport on the Bay of Fundy when I arrived at Maine Farmland Trust and started working with materials and ideas that I was gathering from farms in the area. So I might jump around just a little bit trying to explain how I'm working with materials that tied these two residency experiences together. While I was up in Eastport, I started working with seaweed as a material that I wanted to use sculpturally. And I wanted, more than anything, to try to see if I could make very low-tech audio speakers using seaweed, which I was able to do by combining conductive thread with earth magnets and some very tiny circuitry. So what you see here is the series of 3 images. The still image of the pieces on the left. This is from a series called Seaweed Remembers the Sounds of the Oceans. And it's a kind of a seaweed sound garden that I've made. Each of these pieces is a kinetic piece. If you push the colorful button, you activate a little bit of circuitry that causes the seaweed to vibrate as a membrane and push through a sound that's stored on a small microcontroller. So what you see in the center of the page is a close-up shot of what I'm talking about when I'm referring to the conductive thread. I've coiled it, sewing it through the seaweed and then gluing it on the backside and stretched the seaweed like a little drum around a ring to hold it taut. And then I've mounted on the back of that an earth magnet that will vibrate in response to an electrical pulse. And then on the right is a video clip, which I'm going to play for you, that will reveal some of the sound on the chip. Hopefully everyone will be able to hear that. It's quite quiet, so just give a listen. You should hear a little bit of a machine sound. Very quiet because this is a recording of the actual seaweed membrane. And the sound that you're hearing is a working dock and lobstermen in the morning beginning to load up their lobster traps. And there's a gaggle of seagulls around, which is, those of you who are on the water a lot know that seagulls love fishermen. So what you're hearing is very quiet. And it extends for just a few more seconds. It gets a little bit louder at the end, so I'm going to wait and let that play through. And this next piece is a little bit louder, so I'm going to turn the sound down and warn you on your end that you may want to turn the sound down a little bit. In this case, rather than stretching the seaweed out to make it a taut like a drum, I'm using it to wrap around a little bit of a higher tech speaker so that when the button on this piece is played, the sound is a little bit louder. I use this kind of as an instructional tool in relationship to the other work, so that for people who can't hear the very subtle sounds, the louder sounds help indicate what's going on. So the recording on this is sound birds that you'd hear at the shore. And what I'm trying to capture in these is a kind of material memory of its origin. When I was at Mine Farmland Trust, one of the projects that I got involved in there was going around to various different farms to see what farmers were growing, what kind of livestock they were tending to. And I was collecting field recordings. So part of my practice is to go on hikes or walks and find the sounds that are part of the landscape. So when I was up in Eastport, I was gathering all kinds of sounds from the working docks to the very edges of the water line, hiking out, waiting for the tide to subside so that I could hike out across the seafloor and get to some of the remote islands and record sounds that were only to be heard in those more remote places, and then bringing them all back into my studio and trying to figure out how to make sculptural objects that would emit these sounds. And I just fell in love with the seaweed, which was so exposed when the tide would go out and drop 20 feet. The sea floor is covered with all this beautiful seaweed and all kinds of things that you don't see, you don't have access to when the tide comes in and covers so much of the floor. So this was one of the first pieces that I made in trying to figure out if I could make this high-tech, low-tech thing happen. You can turn your sound back up a little bit more. This is another subtle one in which you'll hear the sound of the ocean waves when you press the button. And one of the curious things that happened for me during this time when I was looking for materials related to the waterfront and related to seaweed and trying to figure out how I could work with it and preserve it, is that I started to meet some of the fishermen, some of the lobstermen, and I met a young man who was starting his own kelp farm, and he would bring into the studio these giant sheets of kelp that I'd roll out and lay on a table and try to figure out first, how am I going to work with this as a material? And then how am I going to preserve it? So one of the things that I did was reach out to some artists who are textile artists to find out how they were preserving very delicate materials to try to create a UV resistant surface, or a hardened surface, or one that wouldn't decay as quickly. And I found that some really interesting materials to use. I tried all kinds of materials to artificially preserve the seaweed. And what I found is that I'm most interested in maintaining a kind of delicacy and a fragility of the material to persist through the piece in a way that will speak to the fragility in not only in the landscape, but in our relationship to the landscape. And in that way, I also am really interested in the very, very quiet nature of these pieces, and that when in a gallery space, if you were in the actual space rather than seeing a video, you would lean into the pieces in order to hear them vibrate and kind of murmur to you. So this last piece I'm going to show you has recordings of loons, and these are the loons that I recorded at Damariscotta Lake there in Jefferson at Maine Farmland Trusts and the Fiore Center. So this is one you'll have to listen to very carefully. It's a very quiet recording. There you go.
Nice. That one was very subtle, but to me, it sounds like sunset when the loons are all gathering on the lake.
That and I found where the farm is on Damariscotta Lake, that very early in the morning, the loons are very active, and really loved being able to be there. I think I'm one of the few artists in the show that's not living in the state of Maine. And so in many ways, this work is it's my love letter to Maine and to the coast of Maine. So thank you. I want to thank the Maine Farmland Trust for giving me the opportunity to come spend some time in such a beautiful landscape. And I would encourage anybody who's here in the audience who hasn't had the chance to go visit the Fiore Art Center, to go check it out. It's a very special piece of land and a very unique location on that body of water. And such a pleasure to hear from the other artists and think about the connections between our work. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was fabulous. You do have a couple of questions here. I think you sort of answered Carl Little's question about drying the seaweed because they're so sculptural.
I dried them over various different forms. And in some cases let them, like the big sheets that this young kelp farmer would bring in, I would drape them over balls or drape them over shapes that I could prop up and let them dry in their own way. I also found I tried to bring them back home to me. I live in Woodstock, New York, in the mountains. So I brought all this dried kelp back with me and found that kelp really wants to be at the ocean. It does not want to be in the mountains. So I had to start treating it very carefully in my studio here to keep it doing all of the things that made it so attractive to me in the first place.
And I think you actually answered this question. Sarah was asking, is the seaweed vibrating to the sounds of the landscape?
It certainly is, yep.
And then just comments, someone couldn't quite hear it. And then Pamela says, so very peaceful.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. They're fabulous. Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you all. actually, for your contributions. They were varied, and I think that they really talk about the connections that we all have in so many different ways with the water. And, you know, it's such an important piece that we don't necessarily think about, but we feel it, whether we think about it or not. And thank you for bringing that to the forefront. This is an idea that I've had for a while, well, over a year, to pull this show together. And I think that you all and the rest of the artists really, really did that with your work. It's fabulous, and it's heartwarming to me that came together as well as it did. I'm so grateful to be able to work with all of you. And Rachel says, Tracy, Chrisanne, each of you, lovely work, passion speaks. Terrific to be a part of this. So yes, and I just have a couple of words here at the end that I'd just like to add in real quick. And I thank everybody that came and is listening. I am honored that it's wonderful. This is probably the biggest audience we've had for a bit, and I know it's hard to be on Zoom calls after you've been on them all week for work, so thank you so much. So I've just got a little prepared piece here. Due to the pandemic, as we know, the gallery is not open to in-person visits, but our exhibits are all online. So see the link in the chat, or you can find the show on the gallery page of the MFT website, along with links to the, and then we're also having other virtual events throughout the fall and winter with MFT that you can join in. We're having an annual meeting, which will be Thursday, December 3rd. And at this year's meeting, we'll hear from community members who are working at the intersection of food, farming, and climate change and are finding hope. So you can RSVP via a link that's also going into the chat. And if you appreciate the work that we do, please support. We have a terrific membership base, and we have all kinds of wonderful things that happen that you can join in by becoming a member. As I said at the beginning of this, this show will be up until January 15th, and then our next show will actually be the 2020 Virtual Residence show. And that will start January 25th, and it will go through April 9th. It's going to be virtual because, you know, we're living in a world of uncertainty in the moment, but our Fiore Art Center, we're still doing residencies virtually and producing beautiful art. The Fiore Art Center that I keep talking about was named after the late artist and environmentalist Joseph Fiore, who was an early supporter of MFT. And it's a program of the Maine Farmland Trust that actively connects the creative worlds of farming, conservation, and the arts. And the purpose of the Fiore Art Center is to stimulate and advance a dialogue between the humans and the environment. And I think that we have definitely done that in some of the programming that we've had here. We sponsored 4 virtual residencies this summer, and they will be exhibiting their work that was created during their residencies. We have a performance artist who was interested in regenerative agriculture, a documentary photographer tackling issues in farming, a social scientist researching food systems, and a writer that's interested in seed-saving practices, and has also worked some interesting history and viral ideas into her writing. So if you'd like to reach out to me for more information, it's very simple. You can email me at karen@mainfarmlandtrust.org. And I really thank you for joining us and for your interest in how we celebrate our agriculture through art. We'll be sending out a follow-up email and a link to this recording. I hope you have a wonderful evening and happy holidays and Thanksgiving. And I hope you can join us again soon. Please feel free to visit Maine Farmland Trust website and explore the website. There's all kinds of really wonderful things happening. And check out the wonderful programs that we have to support Maine farms and farmers. Yeah, I'm just really grateful that you are all here tonight. So thank you. I think that's all that I have for this evening. So thank you all so much for joining.